Tgim, thank God it is Monday, today the 5th of December 2022. We are all welcome to today's discussion, today's conversation. It is the 8th in a series which we have called Raising the Next Generation. Definitely looking at our demographics, more than 50% of Ugandans are below the age 18. And the higher you go up the demographic ladder, the more interesting it becomes. But just to know that looking at the people on the call, everyone on this call is definitely in the minority, 15% of our population. Uganda, the future belongs to the next generation, and we owe it to them to raise them well, to identify mistakes that were made and make sure that they are corrected, and to make sure that we set them on the right footing. This week, we celebrate the International Anti-Corruption Day on Friday, that's 9th December. And so we felt it is befitting today to talk about corruption. And looking at the corruption statistics of our country, we have definitely failed. And whatever mistakes were made need to get corrected, and corrected early enough so that the next generation has a better Uganda than the Uganda we have grown up in, than the Uganda that we live in today. Everyone thinks it's the other that is to fix the situation. We currently, our Transparency International Corruption Perception rating currently puts us at, I think our score was somewhere around 15. Around 25, which would imply that we have about 75% in corruption. And you just need to look around you to see corruption. It is everywhere. It's in our homes, it's in our churches, it's on our roads, it's in our offices, it's in our businesses. It's just a crazy situation that we live in. I found myself a few times asking someone on the road, what example are you giving the children that you are driving with? Recently also, I was moving, and right out of the vehicle in front of me, a person threw out a Kavera full of Pampers into the road and sped away. And I was like, wow, okay. Though the incident to me that really made me feel unhappy was I was driving in the evening jam, and the vehicle of the then Minister of Education, one of the former ministers of education, not the current, just came and didn't just drive on the opposite side, but because there was traffic there, but drove on the pavement, got off the road and drove on the pavement. Now, that means that all the people that were walking had to fly for safety in the bushes. And this was evening as children were coming back from school. And I was like, wow, what are we teaching our children? So it is thoughts like this that gave rise to this, to the idea of this conversation. And we're going to go straight away. I know members will join us probably a bit late, but we shall nevertheless start so that we can start and end on time and not corrupt ourselves. So, Pauline, you're welcome to this conversation. But before we get into, okay, yeah, you can say hello as well.
Hello. Good to see you. Thank you for the opportunity to share on this very, very important topic, and a topic very close to my heart as well, as you know.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me first throw the net a bit wider, and then I'll come back to Pauline. I'm going to ask the rest of the members on what has been your experience with corruption, especially in relation to today's topic. Remember, we are looking at the next generation and fighting corruption and getting them young. But Tedra, what has been your experience with corruption in this country? Please, would you like to share a thought or two?
Yes, I'd like to share a thought. Thank you, Dr. Ernest. Good afternoon, ladies. My experience with corruption hasn't been so great in terms of how many times I've encountered it. But one thing that really gets me is how these days the process of electing leaders in the schools is really messed up. Like, the children are so involved in bribing, like paying their way into position. It doesn't matter, is the person a good leader? All those things are pushed to the side. Whoever has the money, whoever can give the most sweets in the shuttle, whoever. And I wondered, really, if these children at this early age are so engrossed with buying their way to positions and things like that, then how will it be later? So even when you have a child who would want to be in a leadership position, it becomes tricky, like, how far do you go? What helped me is my daughter was unopposed. Otherwise, I don't know how we would have handled that. But that is something I see now, and I'm like, God help us all.
Wow. In our times, I remember all you had to do was talk. Then I got to high school. Computerized posters were not even allowed. You had to strictly use hand-done posters. Got to university. I think that's where I first encountered by then what was referred to as logistics. And I remember campaigning and going to this room, and the person had even had a tally. Each candidate would come in, they would show you what they have given, and they would show you and say, you see the position you're at, you're still doing badly, or you're now in the lead. It's unfortunate that it's now even got to schools, even to primary schools. I think one that really disturbed me, I was talking to someone who told me the child even had to take soda for the teacher in charge of elections. I was like, wow. Not only did they need to distribute sweets and things like that to their fellow, but they even had to distribute sweets to the teacher in charge. And I was really, really disturbed. Said, what the hell is going up about here? Thank you, please, for sharing your thoughts. Would like to welcome the other members that have joined us on the call. We are today talking about raising the next generation and specifically looking at fighting corruption. And we are saying that looking at the demographics of our country, Uganda, we have to focus on the young people. Before I ask someone else for thoughts, there was something else that disturbed me a little bit. Now this one, at first I thought the corrupt people are the people in the Middle Ages. They're trying to maybe get started in life. But then I decided to look through the ages of the people being charged before the anti-corruption court. And a disturbing revelation was that almost all of them were in their late 50s. About a very big percentage was in their late 50s. And I was like, this should be the group that is setting the best example for the younger people. Unfortunately not. But today we're focusing on the young people. Let me request someone else to share their thoughts, their experiences with corruption, especially in relation to the young people, but it could even be outside the scope of the young people. Anyone else would like to share with us? Yes, you're welcome, David. Thank you for joining us. You kindly share with us your thoughts.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody on call. If I recall, many years ago when they used to, or even I know that Dr. Ernest, you're a lawyer, and I know many times they get to the definition. And one of the things I've started wondering is whether the definition for corruption, the one that we hold, still holds water. Why I'm asking that is that it was interesting hearing Peace talk about the thing of schools. And when my daughters were in school, and that one of them is 26, so that's probably around 16 years ago. It was there, and I remember the one who won is because the mother decided to bring forks for every student so that students would eat food with a fork in school, and the school didn't basically dispel it. It is looking like it is now been the acceptable norm. I did a class once, and I was training them in terms of what we call life skills, value-based education. And so I decided a girl should get married, should be a virgin when she gets married. If you agree, divided the room into agree, disagree, and things like that. So they kept moving from side to side, change the question. Then I came to a question about bullets, because that's the cheating thing. Then I said, bullets are acceptable as a sign of helping one another. And the majority of the class moved to agree to that statement. Then we talked back and forth. Then they told me, no, that's what happens in elections. So their thing was that they'd seen it happening in elections, people cheating, that somebody that you want goes through, they'd seen it. They don't understand why. I thought they didn't understand all the intricacies, but they thought you cheat to help a friend go through. Then I just asked them, then why do you hide? And it had not occurred to them. I'm just now wondering, is the definition we have for corruption the one that the general population has for corruption? Or has the standard fallen so low? When you look at the borders riding, and these are young people of their own thing, they no longer look at the red lights, green lights as a basis of guidance. What they think, if I want to go and I think I can go, I will go. And then you also know, if one or two go, and then a car slows down, it's going to make room for others. So others will think, now we can go. Now, if the people then that are supposed to maintain law and order do not do something about that thing, that behavior becomes acceptable behavior. Yes, you might have those accidents and all that kind of stuff, but if the police doesn't stop them, it means that behavior is now acceptable. So going back to the young people, I'm a little confused. When they look at the older generation, they probably see a challenge between what they say, what the older generation says, and what it does. And as other people have said, culture is caught, not taught. So the adults are saying one thing, but the young people are thinking or they're not even thinking about what the adults are saying, or they don't even have time to think about that. They're just doing what they see other people doing. So if we are to go to the young people, I'm wondering, what message are we saying? Number one. Two, that message that we are saying, in which arena is it? And who does it represent? Those are questions that maybe the presenter might also help us understand. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, David, for raising those not very easy questions, stroke observations, and probably you voice a number of concerns that I have had. And when you talk about acceptability, I am reminded of a time we were moving. I was moving with the then Deputy Inspector General of Government and we were moving in a number of districts in West Nile. And the question one of the questions that came up was the issue of nepotism. And when we mooted the idea that jobs should be given out on a free and fair basis, they point blank told us, no, you are lying. We are not going to see our children languish with no jobs and give people from your from your Kampala just because for them they went to school. They told us point blank. They said no. So to them, helping a colleague get a job, regardless of their qualification, as long as it was their brother, it was their son, was not viewed as corruption. So you're right that maybe we even need to have a conversation around the definition of corruption. I have had some people talk of facilitation fee when actually they mean the money they are going to give the officer behind the desk to quicken their work. We'd like to welcome those of us that have joined this conversation. We are looking at raising the next generation and specifically looking at fighting corruption and catching them early, catching the young people early. And we mentioned that this week on Friday, we shall celebrate the International Anti-Corruption Day. So I thought this is a befitting conversation to have. I would like to once again welcome each and every one of you. In a special, I'd like to welcome Dr. Eunice, my mother, for joining in. Professor Eddie, you're welcome, and each and every one of you. Before we get to our guests, let me give just one more person to share with us their thoughts, their experiences on the topic. Just one more person, and then we shall get to our presenter. Any person would like to share their thoughts, their experiences, what have they seen, especially in the children around them? Oh, okay, we shall get to our guests conversationist, because this is a conversation. It's for those joining Tgim for the first time, our Tgim is an informal conversation motivated by the fact that many people dread Monday and would rather have a longer weekend. But we say, no, we actually need to celebrate work, because work is an opportunity from God. And so we discuss various things that about work. My name is Ernest, Tashobya, Katwesigye, and our guest conversationist today is Pauline MUTUMBA. She is a lawyer and she has been engaged in the fight against corruption. I'll let her tell us whatever else she wants to tell us about herself. Pauline, kindly introduce yourself to us, and you can just, before getting into the topic, and just tell us your involvement with corruption or the fight against it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ernest, and a very good afternoon to everybody on the call. From where I am, it is a very good morning. It's almost 5:30 in the morning. And it's really an honor and a privilege for me to be able to join the conversation, thanking God it's Monday and reflecting on the fight against corruption. Like Ernest has introduced me, I am a lawyer by profession. I am currently working with the Uganda Human Rights Commission, where I've been for about 1 year. But previously, I worked with the Inspectorate of Government for about 12 years. And I started in the Directorate of Education and Prevention of Corruption, where our work was largely about going into the communities and teaching the communities about what corruption is, the dangers of corruption, the importance of the Constitution, basically raising awareness in the communities. And a lot of that work had to do with working with young people in integrity clubs, what we referred to as integrity clubs in high schools, in tertiary institutions, and in universities. And I also, after that, I worked in the Directorate of Legal Affairs, where I represented the Inspectorate of Government in court over various issues where our reports were challenged, where our decisions and recommendations were being challenged. So I have been a part of the fight against corruption for a good part of my career. And when we talk about the experiences of corruption, of fighting corruption, but also the experiences of encountering corruption, I think we can all agree that corruption has become basically a way of life. Some of the examples that we've been citing here have become normal. It has become normal for people to use the wrong side of the road. It has become normal for people to facilitate their work across access to public services. It has become a way of life. And so that question that Mr. Katwesigye raised about what is corruption and what do we perceive as a community to be corruption is really a very critical question, and one which I think needs a whole entire conversation of its own. Because when we talk about how we package the messaging that we are giving to the young people, how we are, our own understanding of what amounts to corruption. Personally, my definition of corruption is that it is decay. Because in the places where the Bible has used the word corruption, it is talking about sin, it is talking about decay, it is talking about the degenerative nature of human beings, how we are always veering off from the standard that God has set. But it is true that each of us has a perception of what corruption is. And that is why, personally, I have an issue with the Corruption Perception Index that is used by Transparency International to rate countries, because we perceive corruption differently. Yes, there may be certain things on which we generally agree. For example, we seem as a community to be in agreement that a person asking for money to treat a patient is wrong and should be called out. But we don't seem to have the same sense when it comes to a person who breaks the traffic rules, a person who receives facilitation to do their work. We seem to grade these issues, and therefore, as a community, we say this is acceptable behavior and this is not acceptable behavior. So perhaps we do need to have a conversation, even at much higher levels, of what corruption is to us as a community. But to answer your question briefly, Ernest, in terms of my experiences with corruption. I have been actively fighting corruption. I have interacted with corruption, even, to be honest, even among the institutions that should be fighting corruption. I remember participating in a certain project while I was at the Inspectorate of Government, where there were all sorts of allegations about who has received money, true or not. And it was a very, very stressful assignment to be a part of, because everybody was doubting each other, everybody was treading on eggshells, people were sending out information to the media, false and true information. And I kept on thinking to myself, wow, we are the leading anti-corruption agency in the country, and this is happening here. So imagine if this is happening here, what is happening elsewhere? But also in fighting corruption actively, I have had the experience of corruption fighting back. I remember going to court one time in Mbale, and the person against whom the matter was, he called me you young girl, do you know that the president has ordered, and he referred to the IGG by her first name, I will not repeat it. Do you know that the IGG has ordered this case to be dismissed? And he was standing, holding his hand across his waist, and he was showing me the gun that he was carrying, sort of to show me that, listen to my words, but also see my posture and see what I am able to do to you. And those are realities that we face when we are fighting corruption. So I had to tell him that, unfortunately, those instructions have not been passed down to me, and I'm here to do my job as a professional. I'm sure you will have that conversation with the IGG when you have a chance to, but it intimidates you. I have had the experience of dealing with unscrupulous lawyers in court, people who will do anything to win a case, including bribing court officials, making the file disappear, having the time for a hearing changed so that you're not in court and the matter proceeds ex parte without your representation. I have had those experiences. I have had experiences of people asking for inducements to do work, or expecting you to seek an inducement. I remember handling a case where this gentleman could not believe, the case was really about him getting his emoluments from KCCA. And he kept on asking me, so madam, what do you need? Madam, what else do you need? He just could not believe that a public official could just do their job without expecting anything. So those are some of the experiences that I've had, both in actively fighting corruption, but also in situations where, as an ordinary citizen, as we would say, you interface with it and you feel the injustice, but there's little much that you can do about it at that level, or you feel that sense of despair. I remember thinking to myself, okay, I have not given this inducement, but I know the person that is coming after me is most likely to give that inducement. And what happens? Your things are put on the side, and if you don't know somebody within the system to help you, and I think that is something that is coming more and more, that you may not necessarily have to pay for a service, but you need to know somebody within the system to be able to get things to come through. Are these things that we are thinking about? Are these things that we are questioning? And when we're talking about catching them young, how are we thinking that this lifestyle is influencing our young people? And how are we packaging our conversations so that the young people appreciate? Because the young people see and know, the young people are able to say, but why must we have potholes in our roads? That is a young mind asking questions. And many times as parents, we push off those conversations. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself, Ernest. I think I've answered your first question. I'll allow you to move on to the next question.
No, it is all well. And since you have ushered us right into the next bit, we shall get into it. Today we are talking about the young people and how we can engage the young people, how we can catch them young. So we shall straight away get to the young people. Like has been said by a few of the people that spoke earlier, they already seeing corruption, like you mentioned, Pauline, they see what goes on every day. Yeah, the other day, the current deputy IGG was telling us that she went to a school where she was making a presentation and asked the students to write down the people they know are corrupt. And she was surprised that they were actually able to give names with incidents. So the young people are alive about what is happening. And as we are moving with them every day in the cars, they are seeing, they know jobs, probably they have eavesdropped into some conversations and they know these things. So let us move to the issue of the young people. Why do you think it is really important for us to catch them right where they are, and how are we going to do this? Please share with us your perspectives on that, Pauline. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernest. So why do I think we should start young? There has been when I was active in education, we used to say that the older people are a lost cause, are a lost cause. So let us forget about them and concentrate on the young people. Whereas I don't fully agree with that, because that you cannot underestimate the power of example. You cannot underestimate the power of example for young people. So it doesn't matter how much we are telling the young people, like Mr. Kabiswa said, values are caught, not taught. It does not mean that we must not speak, but if we are speaking while we are not doing anything. And I think that has been one of our greatest weaknesses in our efforts in educating the young people, in training the young people. In some of the places which have a very good record of dealing with corruption, like I know Singapore is one of those that is often talked about, and some others that it can be sensitive to mention. But there's a clip that was recently playing where in Singapore, I think it was in the parliament, where this person was presenting their strategy for how they were going to distinguish themselves in the world, how they were going to be a world player. And they said, we have something that many countries do not have. We have integrity, and not many others are going to be able to get it. And that stood out for me, because I thought to myself, we all talk about fighting corruption, we all aspire to it, but not many of us are succeeding in it. Not many of us are succeeding. And in Uganda, really, we are, despite of the so many efforts that are going on, we are still a long way from getting there. So why do we need to start young? First of all, my base is that the inclination of our hearts is towards evil. That is Genesis 6:5. So we are fighting, when we are fighting corruption, we are fighting against something that, if left to ourselves, all of us, I dare say, are corrupt, because all of us have some element of selfishness, of desiring the best for ourselves at the expense of others. And that is why it is so important for us to have the rules in place, for us to say that this is the standard that must be met. That is why it is important that our leaders are held accountable, declare their assets. I know some people say, why are you invading our privacy? Why should my giving myself to be a leader mean that you go and dig into my closet and find out about my things and my spouse? But what we are trying to say is that if you've chosen to be a leader, if you've chosen to stand out in the community as a leader, we must develop a culture of holding our leaders accountable. And leadership, right from the family level, is ourselves as parents. We are so quick to tell our children what to do, and we are not doing the things that we are telling our children to do. So why must we start early? Because the heart is inclined towards evil, and therefore we must start early to help our hearts to incline themselves towards righteousness. But also scientists and psychologists tell us that the first 7 to 12 years of a child's life have the most impact. That is where the most impact, that's where our brain is learning the things that, that will be a compass to us through life, our values. And so if we really want to have a society, a community that fights corruption, that stands for what is right, then we must inculcate these values to our young people. But also God has provided a design or a print, a blueprint by which nations are built. And that blueprint starts with the family. And so for me, my short answer to how we fight corruption among the young people is to do it in the families, to do it in the setting in which God has provided for us to train up a child in the way that they should go, so that when they are grown, they will not depart from it. I was attending a parents' meeting last week, and we're on the call with my husband, and this parent they asked us to raise issues, and this parent said, what are you going to do about this issue of our children using bad language, especially given that this is a Christian school? And my husband and I looked at each other and said, that is not a job for the school. That is a job for the parent. And so for this parent, they think that the fact that they've taken their child to a Christian school, they have handed over the issue of passing on values to the school. Why is your child speaking bad language? And what have you done as a parent to say, no, our values do not allow us to use bad language? And this is why, because God has given us our mouth to give him praise, to speak things that are praiseworthy, and so that the child has an inner conviction based on their identity of why they do or do not do what they do. And to be honest, that the things that have held me against doing what is wrong has not been the rules, has not been the law, has not been my legal degree. It has been remembering my mother telling me, Pauline, you must always tell the truth. Because I constantly hear my mother's voice telling me you must always tell the truth, I just cannot tell a lie. And that is the impact of a parent. So for me, why we must start young is because that is the place where the values, the compass is formed. Really, after that, we're only trying to panel beat, but that is where the compass is formed. And how do we do this? Deuteronomy 6:6-7 tells us to teach our children as we are walking with them, as we are sitting in the house, when we lie down, when we rise up. Really, when we talk about training, it's not sitting down and just having a conversation. Training is active, and it involves unpleasant things. When we talk about training in a military sense, it is not pleasant. It involves pushing your body beyond what it wants. And I think that is when the Bible says train up a child in the way they should go. They're not saying sort of sit down and just, tell them stories and what. They're talking about that rigorous discipline that forms a person. So we've already said that we must lead by example. Are our children watching us do things that they know we say are wrong, and then we do them ourselves? Are we cutting in line in traffic? That thing has become such an issue because it shows that as a people, we have accepted it, and it's wrong. It's wrong. Are we speaking disrespectfully to authority or about authority, and then wondering why our children are speaking disrespectfully or are not following instructions or obeying them? And of course, there's a place for sitting together and talking and having that interaction. What kind of Uganda do you want to see? There's that program, I think it's on CBS, the Uganda We Want, where they invite leaders to speak about their perspective of what Uganda we should have. We should have similar conversations for our young people. You'd be surprised to hear from the lips of babes the aspirations that these young people have for their nation. And maybe it will challenge those of us who are in the 15% that Ernest spoke about. Because really, if 75% of the population is young people, we can't be the ones deciding for them the Uganda that they want. We must listen to them and say, how do we support them to create that Uganda that they want? But also disciplining them. Do we really teach our children the principle that there is a consequence to everything? That when we sow seeds of corruption, we are reaping the seeds of corruption that was sown a long time ago. And that is why it is endemic now, because we have sown it in so many places. So how do we help children appreciate that when we sow a seed of corruption, we reap corruption? We reap the bad hospitals, we reap the bad roads, we reap a poor education system, we reap a system where amenities do not work if we sow corruption. And how can we have engagements that are interesting, that are child-centered? Because like I was telling you, when we were doing education, the truth is many times we'd come with our curriculum and we are teaching the young people, and we're teaching them things that they already know many times. Now with this social media advent and age, the information is out there. It's not that people do not know, but it is making it relevant. It is making it, how does it apply to my life? How does having a corruption-free Uganda mean that I can express my talents, I can express my gifts better? Because then that gives the young people an individual aspiration to see that our nation is better. But if it's far removed and you're talking about all the political leaders, and many young people will be like, that's none of my business. It will be only a few who will engage. But we need to get it to a level where all of us, all the young people, can appreciate that corruption affects the kind of life, the quality of life that I will have, that my children will have. And then that gives them the inspiration to say, we must build a better Uganda. So Ernest, those are some of my thoughts on the subject of why we need to get them young and how we can get them young.
Thank you very much, Pauline, for sharing your thoughts with us. I believe that we have all definitely picked something from the sharing. Need to be exemplary, the need to engage, the need to discipline, and especially that last one, that the need to discipline really caught my attention, so to say. How do we deal with our children when they display tendencies of corruption? How do we behave when we see them beat the lunch line? At that wedding, the line is long. Do we take the child and tell them, line up in front there? Or do we assist them to know that they must wait in the queue? At church, that's one of the things that I have insisted on, that you'll find a number of times, because they know you're a leader, you'll come to the line and they'll want to take you to the front. And I tell them, no. I am not more hungry than the people that came to the line earlier than me. And because I know that it isn't the wrong thing to do, and on top of that, you have people watching you. Yes, I'll thank you, Pauline. Before I ask Pauline anything, let me open up the discussion a bit. We have listened to what Pauline has shared with us in relation to corruption and the young people. I welcome any comments, any questions, any additions, any subtractions. How do we deal with this endemic of corruption, and especially the little ones? How do we support them to have a better future, a corrupt-free future. Anyone would like to make a comment, a question? Okay, yes, David, you're welcome, Mr. Kamiswa, to make a comment.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mrs. Mutumba, for the presentation. I listened and it got me thinking. And I thought on two angles. One is the Christian angle, be the salt and the light. And it has been told that most Christians are comfortable being the salt than the light. The salt talks about preservation and things like that. The light talks about confrontation. In a lot of the things that we do the preservation. I've just been thinking about, we say the young. What age bracket are we talking about? If we talk about family, maybe we're talking about anything below 7 years old. When are they going to get into issues and times of influence that you give them another 20? So that means that with that one, you're giving it a 20-year span for corruption to be moving. So by the time they come into there to make a change, at least at a big scene, the corruption would have had a 20-year span. They also say there is no law where there is no consequence. When Madame Mutumba talked about Singapore, they took a stand, and they took the stand from the top. Once they took the stand from the top, they were able to curb it. We talk about even just Buvera youth. Many years ago, I was at Gaza High School. They're trying to copy Rwanda in the issue of Buvera. They'd even get some of the people in the PTA to talk to the student, the parents about Buvera. They gave up, I think after one term or two, they gave up. There are countries which are controversial to quote, but I'll quote one, Rwanda. It took a method of saying, you do this, this is the consequence. That's a country now where even money can get lost and people say they took it to the police. We know that there are other elements which might not necessarily be perfect. So we have to be careful in what we quote. But it starts from the top. If we talk to the young people, and the example they're saying every day is saying a different thing, they'll say, yeah. That's what we expected the Christians to say. And I think we might be giving them the wrong message. That's to throw the span in the works. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you for David for that interesting perspective, which I definitely agree with. Yeah, the tone has to change right from the top, but then the question again becomes, so should we sit back and wait until the tone at the top changes? Are we able to do something? And I believe we should be doing something at all levels, at the top, at the middle, in the family, everywhere. And again, I'm reminded of something that Pauline mentioned about the things that have made her not be corrupt. And she mentioned that among others, the words that she had growing up from her parents contributed a bigger factor than the do's and the don'ts that the law has put in place, which I also want to agree with. Any other comment or question or contribution to the conversation, members? Okay, yes, and Deborah, we're glad to see you. Please make your comments.
Good afternoon to all of you. I'm happy to see the picture of David Kabiswa. Kabiswa, how are you and your wife? And also, I'm so happy
Fine,
to.
thank you.
Long lost, eh?
Long lost.
Now, one of the things that
there.
has been a challenge to me is when you want a service through another person. For example, you want your land coveted, you want to file a case, you want your plan to be approved, and then this second or third party tells you, you need to add more money because we need to give those people. You know, if we don't give them, or they ask you a bigger fee, and when you ask why, but coveting is this amount of money, or caveating, whatever it is, and then they tell you, but you know, and these are Christian people, saved, born again, confessing Christ, coming to church, spirit-filled. And they tell you this, you know, you cannot get anything done unless you want it to take months. You have to give me more money to do for you this. In your view, madam or whoever, what do you advise us as Christians to do when fellow Christians are the ones asking for that money? And you want something done. You want the plan, you want your land to be caveated, and you don't have the time, and you don't want to fight battles. What do you do? Or you want a case filed or sorted?
Wow, thank you for that. Not very easy question, Deborah. And in a moment, our guest conversationist will respond. Let me take just one more comment before we get back to our guest. Anyone want to make a comment or question? Yes, members, anyone want to make a comment or question? Okay, let me read. Festo Chaga says, talk about introducing anti-corruption as one of the subjects in school as a possible solution. Okay, there's an idea there. Should we introduce anti-corruption as one of the subjects? You can comment on that as well. Mrs. Mutumba, Pastor Alan Guma says, thanks, Mrs. Mutumba and members. One generation mentors another through establishing a cultural system. So it is quite a paradox how we shall change the next generation. So in other words, how shall we evangelize when we ourselves have not been converted? An interesting one. So should we just give up and say corruption is a lost cause to whom it may concern? Then Gracie Walker says, talk about patriotism as a subject in schools, love for one's nation and people. Okay, so Pauline, there are all these interesting questions for you. But before we get to them, let us also hear a few people and then you can respond as well. Yes, Pastor Guma, you're welcome to make a comment and then we shall get back to our guest conversationist.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Mutumba, Dr. Ernest and members. On a positive note, UMI, at least that's not a young generation, but at least intermediate for them. As an institution, they introduced a module to do with ethics in every course. And they even examine it in every examination of every course. So people may not fully change their minds, but at least if one person through learning about ethics is changed, it contributes something to the nation. Thank you.
That is great. Yeah, okay, thank you for that information. That is great information. Uganda Technology and Management University as well. I've looked at their courses, their content. They have ethics embedded in every course. Within the course units, you look at their exams, they have ethics embedded in their exams. So yes, I would like to appreciate the institutions that are taking this serious. So over to you, Mrs. Mutumba, to share with us to respond to those comments that have been made, and as well give your final remarks. Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you very much. I think it's listening in from the comments. This is a subject that is close to all our hearts, and for me, that in itself gives me hope that we recognize that we have a problem. Because sometimes you can be, of course, going in the wrong direction and you're not even aware that you're going in the wrong direction. So for me, that gives me hope that we recognize that the magnitude of the challenge that we have to deal with. Mr. Kaviswa talked about salt and light, and he said that as Christians, I believe many of us on this call are Christians, we tend to be more concerned, we find it easier to be salt as opposed to being light, which is supposed to be driving out the darkness, that confrontation. And I shared with you earlier on some of the experiences that I had with the confrontation part of fighting corruption. And I'll be honest with you, there are times when I told myself, this fight is not worth my life. You know, I want to stay alive and raise my children. So that confrontation, that being willing to, and I think it ties in with what the question that Auntie Deborah asked about when you hear Christians and they're saying, you know, we have to add in this amount of money to facilitate, whether it is lodging a caveat or registering a case or getting your plans approved. There are two things I want to say about corruption. One is that it is a heart issue more than a head issue. So yes, I am for us having patriotism clubs. Like I mentioned earlier on, we had integrity clubs, we have integrity clubs in schools. That was the initiative of the Inspectorate of Government. I know Office of the President has the patriotism clubs. There are all these interventions. And we've heard from Pastor Guma about ethics, and we've heard about ethics at UTAM from Dr. Ernest. All these are good interventions. It's better than not having any. But ultimately, corruption comes to the heart issue, not the head issue. We know that it is wrong. But why is it that we still continue to have these influences? And that is why I am saying that there must be something that is put into the hearts of our young men and women that causes them to believe that this is wrong. Whether we are getting the word at the top or not, whether we are getting the tone set at the top or not. In terms of actually having change, quick change, we must have the tone at the top. But in terms of developing a movement of people, a generation that will come and say, no, we do not accept this as a way of life. We are choosing this. It must come from the heart. About the question that Auntie Deborah asked, I think it really comes down to you as the individual counting the cost. I will share that I had such an experience with my parents. They were trying to transfer some land, and the lawyer who was helping them mentioned it to them that, you know, we need to include this amount of money to facilitate the process. And my parents chose to say, no, it's okay, we will wait. So they chose not to pay the bribe, but they had to count the cost, because in Uganda today there will be a cost, and many of us are not willing to pay that cost. We want our things done, and so we pay, we cave. That's why I'm saying that really it's a heart issue. We know it, but at the end of the day, you count your cost, and each one of us individually is going to make that call. And I cannot say the call that we will choose to make, but to consciously every time. And you know, when it happens so many times over and over, eventually you're like, you know what? It's easier to swim with the tide. So swimming against the tide is not an easy call. It's not an easy call. Someone talked about patriotism, the love for one's nation. Yes, we must teach patriotism, but I am very wary about names that we throw at things and brand, and we say patriotism. Because just like we define corruption differently, we define patriotism differently. So maybe we need to have a conversation around what is patriotism actually? And before we say that we are teaching patriotism, because we may all be teaching different kinds of what we call patriotism. That's why I talked about asking our young people, what is the Uganda we want? That is really patriotism. That love for our nation. We see the things that Amos Wekesa is doing with tourism. That is patriotism, but no one is paying him to do it. No one has taken him to a class to do it. He loves what he does. He loves his nation and he's patriotic. So I'm not saying that we do not need to have the classes, but I'm saying let us re-examine the quick answers that we give about, yes, let's have patriotic clubs. Yes, let's have integrity clubs. Yes, let's have ethics. Let's have a curriculum. Because actually the Inspectorate of Government did make that recommendation to the Ministry of Education. And I believe it was taken on to have anti-corruption as part of the curriculum at all levels. And I know that these are things that it always helps to have a form of structure, to think through a curriculum and all that. But what can we do beyond that? And my answer to what can we do beyond that is that it must be in our homes, one home at a time, to see that we see the change that we want to see in our nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Mutumba, for sharing your afternoon with us, stroke morning, and for these very insightful ideas that you have shared with us. I believe that each of us has benefited from this conversation. Edith Birawa proposes checks and balances should be strengthened in local governments at the point of service delivery. And I tend to think, but we have them. We have the checks and balances. Why are they not working? Audrey says, great engagement, glad I was able to attend. So as we conclude this conversation, thank you to each and every one of you for joining in. Like we've shared, let us take it upon ourselves to save our nation. First of all, by being the example, and then secondly, by showing the way to the next generation, helping them realize that we can do things differently, that the Uganda that they deserve is a better Uganda. Thank you all for joining in. We shall have this conversation of Thank God It's Monday again next week, where we shall have another topic. Kindly look out for the invite. God bless you all. Blessed week, and once again, thank God it is Monday. Thank you. God bless you.
It's Monday. Thank you very much.